The quote, "Blessed are those who can give without remembering and take without forgetting," expresses one of the deepest spiritual truths about the nature of love, humility, and human connection. On the surface, it appears to be a simple statement about generosity and gratitude, but in a spiritual context, it reveals an entire philosophy of how to live in harmony with oneself, with others, and with the unseen order of life itself. It speaks to the purification of intention, the dissolution of ego, and the sacred balance between giving and receiving that sustains both individual growth and collective well-being. To understand this quote spiritually, we must first examine the nature of giving. In ordinary human interaction, giving is often entangled with expectation. We give and quietly keep score. We help someone and hope they will remember our kindness. We make sacrifices and anticipate recognition or appreciation. Even when we believe we are acting selflessly, the ego subtly intervenes, whispering, "They owe me." This hidden ledger transforms what could be an act of love into a transaction. True spiritual giving, however, arises from a different place entirely. It emerges from a sense of abundance rather than lack. When one gives without remembering, one gives freely without attachment to outcome, without desire for praise, and without expectation of return. Such giving reflects an understanding that what we offer to others ultimately flows from a source beyond ourselves. It is not something we possess, but something we channel. In this sense, giving becomes less about the object or service provided and more about the consciousness behind it. A small act performed with pure intention carries greater spiritual weight than a grand gesture motivated by pride or obligation. When you give without remembering, you release your claim to the act. You do not revisit it mentally to reinforce your identity as a generous person. You do not remind the recipient of your kindness, either directly or indirectly. The act dissolves into the fabric of life, becoming part of the unseen network of goodwill that binds humanity together. This kind of giving requires humility. The ego thrives on recognition. It wants acknowledgement, gratitude, and admiration. But the spirit seeks none of these. The spirit understands that love expressed through giving is its own reward. When you give without remembering, you affirm that your worth does not depend on how others respond. You trust that the act itself contributes to the harmony of existence, even if no one notices. Equally profound is the second half of the quote, "And take without forgetting." Receiving graciously is often more difficult than giving. Many people struggle to accept help because they associate it with weakness or dependency. Others accept assistance but quickly forget the kindness extended to them. They move on as though nothing was given, failing to acknowledge the interconnectedness that made their progress possible. Spiritually, to take without forgetting means to receive with gratitude and awareness. It is to recognize that no one achieves anything alone. Every step forward in life is supported by countless visible and invisible contributions from teachers, friends, family members, mentors, and even strangers. To receive without forgetting is to honor these contributions, not by feeling indebted in a burdensome way, but by remembering the love that made them possible. Gratitude transforms receiving into a sacred act. When you accept help with humility and appreciation, you affirm the unity that underlies all relationships. You acknowledge that giving and receiving are not opposites but complementary movements within the same flow of life. Just as inhaling and exhaling sustain the body, giving and receiving sustain the soul. In many spiritual traditions, life itself is understood as a gift. The breath you take, the opportunities you encounter, the relationships you form, all are expressions of grace. To take without forgetting is to live with an awareness of this grace. It is to remember that what you have been given is not solely the result of your own effort, but also the product of circumstances beyond your control. When giving is free of memory and receiving is rich with remembrance, a remarkable balance emerges. You no longer feel superior when you give, nor inferior when you receive. You see both actions as part of a continuous exchange that enriches everyone involved. The boundaries between self and others soften. Compassion becomes natural. This balance also protects against resentment. When you give and remember, you may later feel exploited if your kindness is not reciprocated, but when you give without remembering, there is nothing to resent. Similarly, When you receive and forget, you may develop entitlement, but when you take without forgetting, gratitude keeps entitlement at bay. Spiritually mature individuals understand that generosity is not measured by quantity, but by quality of intention. A person who gives anonymously may contribute more to the world's harmony than one who donates publicly for recognition. Likewise, someone who quietly appreciates assistance may embody greater humility than someone who loudly proclaims independence. Another dimension of this quote involves trust. To give without remembering requires faith that what you offer will find its rightful place in the world. You trust that the universe or the moral fabric of existence will absorb your act and multiply its effects in ways you cannot foresee. You release control over the outcome. To take without forgetting requires trust as well, the trust that accepting help does not diminish your worth. Instead, it affirms your participation in the human community. It acknowledges that vulnerability is not weakness but openness to connection. In a broader sense, this quote invites us to transcend transactional thinking. Modern life often reduces relationships to exchanges, favors for favor, services for payment, support for loyalty. While practical considerations are necessary, a purely transactional mindset impoverishes the spirit. It narrows our interactions to calculations of gain and loss. Spiritual living, by contrast, emphasizes unconditional goodwill. It encourages us to act from love rather than obligation, to appreciate kindness rather than assume it. When giving and receiving become expressions of compassion rather than commerce, relationships deepen, trust grows, community strengthens. There is also a transformative effect on the giver. When you give without remembering, you loosen the grip of self-centeredness. You shift your focus from personal achievement to collective well-being. This shift fosters inner peace because it reduces the anxiety associated with maintaining a particular image or status. Similarly, when you receive without forgetting, you cultivate humility. You recognize that your journey is interwoven with others. This recognition fosters empathy. You become more inclined to assist others because you remember what it felt like to be helped. Over time, this cycle of mindful giving and grateful receiving nurtures a culture of compassion. Each act of generosity inspires another. Each expression of gratitude reinforces connection. The cumulative effect is a more harmonious society. On an individual level, practicing this principle can transform your inner life. You may notice a reduction in pride when helping others and an increase in appreciation when accepting support. You may become less concerned with recognition and more attentive to opportunities to serve. Ultimately, the blessing described in the quote is not bestowed externally. It arises naturally from living in alignment with these principles. When you give without remembering, you free yourself from the burden of expectation. When you take without forgetting, you enrich yourself with gratitude. In spiritual terms, this alignment brings you closer to your true nature. The essence of the soul is not accumulation but expression of love, kindness, and understanding. By giving freely and receiving gratefully, you embody this essence. The quote thus becomes more than advice. It becomes a pathway. It invites you to participate in the sacred rhythm of life with humility and generosity. It encourages you to release the need for acknowledgement and to embrace the gift of remembrance. In doing so, you discover that the greatest blessings are not material rewards, but inner states, peace, connection, and a sense of unity with all that is. And these blessings arise naturally when giving is selfless and receiving is grateful. To live this way is to honor both the dignity of others and the grace that sustains us all. It is to recognize that every act of kindness contributes to a larger tapestry of compassion. It is to remember that while we may give at times and receive at others, we are always part of the same flowing exchange. Blessed indeed are those who can give without remembering and take without forgetting, for they have learned the art of living with an open heart.